welcome to the Fantasy Wildcard. I'm your host, Kev. You can follow me on Twitter at dynasty_goat. With me tonight, as always, is my amazing co-host, Matt, who you can follow on Twitter at MattFFDynasty. Good evening, Matt.
Evening, Kev. How are you doing?
Yeah, not bad. Thank you very much. Yourself?
Yeah, I think I'm still recovering from the Super Bowl. I think even though we're over a week gone from that game, but with that age of mine getting up there, I'm sleep deprived and I'm struggling to catch up. So yeah, still recovering, but as I said, it's all worth it, isn't it, for Super Bowl?
Yeah, and I've seen that you've been filling your time with some new startups.
I have, yeah. You some that you're in as well. So it's good that we get to have a bit of competition next year in these Dynasty Best Balls that Tom obviously set up as good friend Tom. So yeah, it's been exciting getting into some startups and get me in the mood for a couple more, I think.
Indeed, it's just whet the appetite to get up to 25 leagues I want to be in, hopefully.
Exactly. So it's all downhill from here, isn't it?
Yeah, if you've got any spare leagues, just hit me up and I'm happy to have a look. But yeah, it's us two tonight, Matt. There's no Ali, unfortunately. Ali's got COVID again for the second time. So hope that Ali's feeling better soon. Hope he enjoys listening to us rip him most of the show tonight. It's just terrible news. He was meant to be on the show tonight, but we've sort of tweaked it a little bit. We're gonna do his best to keep it together, keep it real. We've not got the full band today, but I'm sure we bring you
rolling back the years, aren't we, Kev? Back to the old days, me and you.
Absolutely, professionals we are. So it's going to be a cracking show tonight. But before we get into the main part of the show, we're going to actually drop some news. It was out on Twitter, but we kind of didn't. We kind of glossed over it a little bit on the last show. It was a Super Bowl. We had Wardy on as a great guest as well, so we didn't mention it then. But we want to give it its own sort of standalone piece to announce it in true fashion. So we're super excited for expanding the Fantasy Wildcard brand even further. We've got a new show that we're dropping on our channel for the 2022 season, Fantasy Wildcard Rewind. And this is going to be focusing on recapping the recent action from a real life point of view. So it's going to be a complete contrast to what we do on this show as hardcore dynasty guys. But we're going to welcome on two amazing gents, Mags and Paul, as co-hosts. These guys are 100% worth a follow on Twitter. They're great blokes, are super passionate and really keen to deliver some content for this audience. So you can follow them at Mags on Sport and at Paul_Picking. Super exciting times for Fantasy Wildcard. Have you got any thoughts on the addition of Mags and Paul?
It's just like you said, really, Kev. It's great to get them both on, guys that we've got to know over the last year or so. Obviously, Mags is doing great with his current podcast at the minute, the Dynasty Hot Seat. So it's great that he's wanting to come over, join us on our brand and getting Paul in as well. Who's obviously a great guy, somebody that's grown close to us, is a big fan of our show. So it's great that we can get him on board and. Yeah, it's just exciting and something different than, like you said, than what we do. So hopefully if the audience are looking for something a little bit different, a little bit more in touch with what's going on in terms of real life, then yeah, it's really exciting.
Indeed, it is. In keeping it on the exciting theme, on today's show, we'll be previewing the upcoming free agent QB and running back groups from a dynasty perspective. So generally with your QB and your running back, these tend to be either hitting free agency or re-sign. We don't see many of the franchise tagged players, but these are really valuable players on your roster as well. So we'll jump into it straight away at the QB position. And who's the first guy I'd like to talk about, Matt?
Yeah, so we're going to start with Jameis Winston, better known as Mr. 30-30, obviously, from his time with the Buccaneers. And it's interesting because there's a lot of rumours going around at the moment that he could potentially be going back to Tampa Bay. And to be honest, I think he is the best quarterback out of all these upcoming free agents. So I think it makes sense that he's getting linked to these teams that are in need of quarterback, obviously, with Tom Brady retiring from the Buccaneers. And it's interesting with Winston because he's not what he was when he was first at the Buccaneers, as I mentioned, with that 30-30 reputation that he's got. With the Saints, he actually seemed to really turn it around, and he wasn't throwing all those interceptions before he obviously had that knee injury. 14 touchdowns, just the 3 interceptions in the 6 games that he did play before he got hurt. So really impressive to see him rein back those interceptions. We spoke about it in the off season that he needed to do that. He needed to rein in those interceptions, because if he did, then Sean Payton he weren't going to stand for that way, and
No.
it was always going to turn to his favourite quarterback in Taysom Hill. So it was great to see Winston be able to do that, and as I say, he's one of the most fascinating quarterbacks to me in the free agent market with quarterback position. In all honesty, there's not a great deal of them in this coming free agency. So definitely the guy that stands out to me, and somebody that I think can really see a spike in his dynasty value if he does land in a good spot. A return to the Saints is definitely a possibility. We know that they've got some cap issues, but if they can get him on a cheap deal, I think Winston would love to go back to the Saints. Then there's obviously a common one. The Steelers is a destination that we keep talking about. There's Washington as well. The Commanders. It doesn't quite feel right to say the Commanders.
It doesn't. It's awful.
The Washington Commanders. They're in need of a quarterback, so another possible landing spot. And then, as I say, Tampa. And I think that's the one that really stands out as a team that can boost his value. Obviously, Mike Evans being there. Potentially Chris Godwin if he stays as well. That's a really exciting offense, and we've seen it before with Winston. It's a great spot from him. He was actually just a QB2 for most of his career before Bruce Arians arrived at the Buccaneers, but when he arrived, he had that amazing fantasy season, finishes the QB4. It was just those turnovers when it really that ended his reign in Tampa. But if he has cleaned them up, if he is now that improved quarterback coming off that LASIK surgery to his eyes, maybe he can see who's throwing it to now, and hopefully that's helped him out. So yeah, I think there's definitely a chance that he could land in Tampa or any of these teams that are in need of a quarterback and get a nice boost in terms of dynasty. So Kev, my question to you is, would you be looking to maybe trade for Jameis Winston in dynasty, and would you be happy to pay, say, a second round pick to get him?
Yeah, I think in general, I'm happy to send a late second for any QB that could be a potential starter next season. I did it with Cam Newton this year, a few days before I turned into Cam Darnold. So that was a wasted pick, but it's not something I'd change. I'm happy to throw a late second if we just base it on last year's late second. You might have been taking a guy like Kellen Mond or somebody in that range. So I think going after a veteran makes sense. I think consensus-wise, I do like that dice roll on Jameis Winston. I think there's a strong chance that he's a starter for the Saints. But there's also a few other interesting places. Obviously, Tampa. I don't really know if you should go back to an X. That's not usually a good thing to do in all forms of life. But a few interesting places. Texans, obviously, Lovie Smith's the new coach there, and that was Winston's first coach in the NFL. For the Titans as well, John Robinson was the GM. He was a key personnel guy the year that Winston was drafted by the Bucs, and obviously Tannehill, he was a big reason why the Titans didn't progress despite being the 1 seed. So I wouldn't be shocked if the Titans went after a veteran QB to maybe just apply a little bit of pressure to Tannehill, a little bit like he did when my favourite boy, who we might mention a little bit later on, was in Tennessee. But yeah, I think with Winston, that style of play is going to be exciting fantasy wherever he does land. He's the modern day Ryan Fitzpatrick in my eyes. He's going to sort of bounce around the league for the next 10 years or so. But whenever he does play, it's going to be super exciting. So yeah, I'm happy to go after him. He's an ideal veteran QB3 type in my eyes. I've also just taken him in that Dynasty Best Ball League that we're in together. So I'm putting my money where my mouth is as well. He's my QB3 in that. What's your thoughts on Jameis? Do you like the upside? Is there the upside that we think it is? Or is it just that he's an exciting guy and you just want to be associated with him?
Yeah, it's like we touched upon earlier. I think we've seen the potential that you can get from somebody like Winston with the time that he had at the Buccaneers. I'm not expecting to finish the QB4 again in fantasy, but he does have that upside. We know he's got a bit of rushing ability to him as well. We know he can run the ball a little bit too. So there is that excitement, that potential in terms of fantasy. And if you can get a guy like that for a second round pick, then to be honest, I think it's worth it. You just mentioned guys that from say last year, guys like Kellen Mond. I mean, there's a chance that they could develop into something, but with Winston, like you said, you know that there's a more stronger possibility that he's going to get a chance to be a starter. I mean, if you were picking between the two, I know I'd rather have as a starting quarterback, and that's the guy that's at least proven that he can play in the NFL. And as I say, his past season, the fact that he cleaned up his struggles in terms of the interceptions is something that's encouraging. So if you can get a guy like that for a second, and if he does become the starter somewhere, you know that value is going to shoot up from a second. We always say it, starting quarterbacks tend to get a first round pick for those guys, don't you, in terms of fantasy?
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you can get him for a late second, I think the worst case scenario is you can recycle that for maybe a second next year. And to be honest, I think we're bigger fans of next year's class anyway than this year's, and I think it's got more depth to it anyway. So it feels like a win-win. But I don't think you can really go wrong with getting Winston. You're gambling on that upside, and if it doesn't turn out, then I think you've still got a strong chance of being able to sell him again next year for hopefully a second round pick.
Yeah, and I think with Winston, it's really nice that he got a second chance. He's been able to show that actually he's not just a one-trick pony. He's changed his game slightly, and it really stood out at the early part of the season. Obviously, had a few spike games, but it was nice to see him not turn the ball over. It's got to be great for his future, obviously, building on that second chance. So now going to move on to my first guy, and second chance, it's something that resonates with this guy as well. Mitch Trubisky. So I've kind of got a bit of a soft spot for Trubisky. I think he gets tarnished for the fact that he went before Mahomes and Watson in his draft. A little bit like Tua being in the same draft as Herbert and Burrow. You're going to get that negative outlook on him straight away just based on who was going around him or in the same draft. I think terrible coaching, Matt Nagy, who was utilised pretty badly under him there. He got benched midway through Game 3 in 2020 against the Falcons. The Bears were actually 2-0. Up to that point, he'd done nothing wrong really, apart from a sloppy first half, and he got yanked for Nick Foles. That seemed to be an agenda of Nagy. Look, we know Trubisky is not an elite passing QB, but I think you've got to be a frozen caveman to think that QBs in the NFL nowadays are just pocket passers. There's different guys that win in different ways. I think real life, he's been superb. He's got a winning record as a QB. He's been to the playoffs twice in 4 years, obviously. So is Jimmy G, and he's rubbish. But I just thought it was interesting that people don't seem to mention that about Trubisky. He was also QB 11 in fantasy points per game in 2018 in his second season. So I definitely think he's showing enough for a second chance. He's never going to get back behind Josh Allen in Buffalo, and he'll likely have to go to a team with a shaky QB. So I think also it's got to be a scheme where it's featuring a rushing QB. If you tell him to sit back, drop back and throw 50 passes, you're in trouble. Yeah. Now, I've got a clear connection here, connecting the dots to his former OC, Brian Daboll. I think the Giants are a perfect match, which, I don't think you're as thrilled about as I am. But, I just think the new coach and GM, they're both from Buffalo. There's zero ties in the build with Daniel Jones. And I do think it's Daniel Jones' last chance saloon in year 4. I do agree. Big upside with Daniel Jones. I think there's no more hiding for him. But just to look at some of the numbers, Daniel Jones' career QB rating, 84.3. Mitch Trubisky career QB rating, 87. So I think Trubisky has been slightly better as a passer. He's a known professional, experienced. He's been to the playoffs. He's got that round 1 talent as well. So I do think he's an ideal cheap backup with starter upside if Daniel Jones does fall flat on his face like he did playing the Eagles that time. An interesting...
that one in there, didn't you, Kev?
I can't believe he went about 90 yards. That was shocking. I think Trubisky is an interesting bench stash. I think he does have QB to upside if he does hit the field. It's just if he does land in my predicted destination of the Giants, what percentage chance do you think is that he starts over Daniel Jones at any point in 2022?
At any point, I like that you've added at any point, because I do think there's a slight chance of any point, but overall I'm going to say like 20% chance that he gets to be the starter. He's definitely an interesting free agent, and as you say, I think he's a really good fit for the Giants. Like you've touched upon, he's got some very similar traits to Daniel Jones, the fact that he is able to run the ball. It's a little bit why the Bills brought him in to back up Allen. Obviously, another similar quarterback, maybe not the same in terms of talent as Daniel Jones. I think he's got a little bit on Daniel Jones, to be honest. But I think he fits really well into what the Giants would need if anything were to happen to Daniel Jones. Obviously with that rushing upside, but I think we can't pretend that he's something that he's not, Kev. I mean, he's not been a starter for a couple of years. I personally don't see him as an upgrade on Daniel Jones in any way, really. You could argue that they're very similar, but I just don't get what sense would it make to switch to Trubisky during the season. I think this, as you touched upon, is the year when the Giants need to see what they've got in Daniel Jones. I think they need to give him as much chance as possible. And if he does fall on his face, then we're going to be selecting one in the 2023 class, aren't we? I can't see us sticking with Trubisky, even if he does play Trubisky and he turns out to have a couple of solid games. I think we're definitely targeting a quarterback in 2020. Even if Daniel Jones has a solid season, I still wouldn't be surprised if we took one in 2023. That year we'll be heading into deciding if we're going to take the 5th-year option on Daniel Jones as well. So it's definitely going to be interesting. But yeah, I think we're taking a quarterback in 2023. The only time I do see Trubisky being a start is if anything were to happen to Daniel Jones, or maybe the last few games, just to see what they've got in Trubisky. And as I say, then they can decide maybe they keep Trubisky as a backup going into the following year and letting Daniel Jones go and not taking up that 5th-year option. So yeah, that's the way I view it. What do you think, Kev? I feel like you're wanting, you're trying to will this on me. You're trying to speak it into existence and get Trubisky a starting job.
Yeah, I'll tell you my train of thought. I reckon that if it does happen, because I do like the old connection of dots between Buffalo and Dable, etc. But I think if it does happen, I'm not expecting Trubisky to turn up and be a QB battle in camp. I think it's Daniel Jones's. It's his job until he proves it's not. Which it might be half season. It might be all season. I can just see something in my range of outcomes where it's a little bit like Jalen Hurts and Carson Wentz, where last 4 or 5 games, maybe Trubisky gets a bit of run. Maybe the Giants want to lose games, so they put Trubisky in, playing into your thoughts there. And then I think if he does perform well, it's going to be potential to keep him as a high-end backup for a rookie in a sort of a transition period, or even if he plays really well, he's a former first rounder. I'm sure he'll be able to get some sort of draft capital for him if you did decide to trade him. If you hit one of those super elite 2023 rookies that are ready to start straight away, Stroud or Young. So yeah, I'm hopeful Trubisky goes there. I've got him in a few places in our Dynasty Best Ball draft. Just see who selects him in a few rounds.
Trying to bait me into taking him now. Overdrafting.
Yeah, we'll have to see. Who's took Daniel Jones actually. Was that you?
That was me, yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was you.
It was. Anyway, moving on.
Yeah, we don't want to get into more tips that I give away in that draft. So moving on to your next QB, Matt.
Yeah, so I've gone for Teddy Bridgewater, or as we call him, Steady Teddy, and yeah, again looking for a new team coming up to the 2022 season, but coming off a solid, if unspectacular season with the Broncos, finishes the QB 22 in fantasy. That was despite missing the final few games of the year. Just over 3,000 passing yards, 18 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions. So, as I say, pretty much what you come to expect from Teddy Bridgewater in terms of fantasy. He's just constantly been a low-end QB2 throughout his career. Finishes the QB 21, QB 23, QB 19, and QB 22 in the 4 seasons where he has been a starter in the NFL. But I do think he's an interesting quarterback as we head into the off-season, especially in terms of real life anyway, because I think there are going to be numerous teams that are looking to get a quarterback like Teddy, a bridge quarterback. And we've touched upon a few teams, obviously Steelers, the Buccaneers, the Saints. These are all teams that are looking for a quarterback. So maybe they do take a veteran like Teddy and then maybe select a rookie as well and just use Teddy as that bridge quarterback, as I mentioned. But in terms of fantasy, it's hard to get excited about somebody like Teddy Bridgewater. As I say, he's never really flashed that upside. He's just safe in his Steady Teddy. That's why he's got that nickname. But it does seem to find his way into a starting role, and in turn, it does become a serviceable fantasy quarterback. So I definitely think he's interesting. His current ranking is QB 38. So I would expect that to creep up if he does find a new landing spot. As I say, he's definitely serviceable in terms of fantasy. So if he is a starter, I mean, he's got to bump up a little bit from that 38 ranking, I think. So a little bit like the question with Winston, Kev, is he a guy that you'd look to trade a second round rookie pick for? Obviously, he doesn't have that upside of maybe somebody like Winston, but are you happy to take on that risk that he could potentially lose his starting job at any point, but he is a serviceable quarterback?
Yeah, I think first of all, I'm a big fan of trading those mid to late second round picks for any position for a veteran player on a contending team. I think the hit rate for second round rookies is 25% at best. I think the veterans have got a greater certainty and bigger chance to outperform a random rookie over the next couple of years as well. So I think that's one thing I personally prefer to do. I'm definitely not doing it for Teddy for an early or mid-second. I think with this class, it's more deeper than elite. I mean, there's probably going to be QBs available in round 2. If a guy like Desmond Ridder gets day 2 draft capital in real life, I'm more inclined to take a punt on Ridder being something, especially as a potential dual threat QB. I mean, yeah, if I'm on the clock and Ridder's there, I'd lean Ridder, but I guess what would you do, Matt? Would you take Ridder over Teddy Bridgewater in that scenario, or are you going to stick with the steady Teddy as someone that's going to definitely give you a shot at starting this next season somewhere?
Yeah, I think you touched upon it. The fact that obviously he's just a steady quarterback. I'm shooting for that upside. You mentioned these second round picks. It's not a great chance that you hit on him. Like I said, 25%. So if I've only got that slim chance, I'm rather shooting for upside rather than just going for a steady quarterback. I mean, if you're trying to get Teddy Bridgewater, you're likely just trying to get him as your QB3, because if you're trying to get him as your QB2, or God forbid you're trying to get him as your QB1, then you're in deep trouble. And I think you need to do a little bit more than get somebody like Teddy. So I'd rather just shoot for that upside. Somebody like Ridley, like you touched upon, the fact that he's dual threat, he's got a little bit more upside. I'd much rather go for somebody like that than getting Teddy.
Yep, I do agree with you on that one. Ridder for the upside. If he lands in round 1, he's not going to be there at the back of the second. So yeah, we'll cross that bridge a little bit later on when we get more information on draft capital. So that brings us to the end of QBs. Obviously short and sweet. There's not usually a ton of QBs to get your juices flowing, but running back, there's a few interesting names here. So we'll kick off with the first guy who you'd like to discuss, please, Matt.
Yeah, so the first one is Leonard Fournette. He's probably one of the more exciting ones out of this group of free agents. Another productive season for Lombardi Lenny. Really productive, and in terms of fantasy as well, having his best production to date, finishes the RB6, and that was despite missing his final 3 games of the regular season through injury. And I think what was the really exciting part with Fournette this past year, and definitely in terms of fantasy, was those targets that he got, 84 targets. He actually led the league in RB targets before his injury, before finally finishing in 3rd in terms of targets. So that was something that was really exciting to see and really encouraging in terms of his fantasy production. Certainly helped a lot of teams be carried to the fantasy playoffs with that performance, because when you did draft him, you likely got him as your RB2, maybe RB3, maybe even lower than that with how low he was going in drafts last off season. But now he does it free agency. I don't think he's going to be returning to the Buccaneers, given all the turnover that they've had with that roster and obviously the cap issues that they've got as well in terms of the cap space. So yeah, I do believe that he hits free agency, and with that, I think there's going to be a lot of interest in Fournette, obviously given the way he performed in that 2020 playoff run and the way that he performed last season as well. But with that, I do think in terms of fantasy, his value is going to remain quite high. I think a lot of people are going to remember the last couple of years and that production that he's put up. So even though he is maybe getting up there in terms of running back age, he's 27. I mean, by no means old in terms of real life. I mean, we're a couple of 30 odd year olds, so we're definitely not going to say that that's old. But in terms of fantasy and running backs, this tends to be that area where that cliff appears and you start to worry about the drop in production. So with that, I don't think I'm going to have too many shares of him. To be honest, I don't think I've got any at the moment, and I can't see that improving if people are going to keep valuing him quite high. So if you do own him, I'm probably suggesting that you maybe sell him on that value, because there is that risk. We don't know where he's going to end up. If I can trade him, get maybe a younger running back, I'm definitely looking to do that. I think there's too much uncertainty, I think, for me to want to take a risk on him, given the value that I've seen him going around lately. Even though he does have a shot to end up being a lead back somewhere, it's just that risk of not knowing where, which puts me off. So, Kevin, my question back to you is, while I was looking at Leonard Fournette, looking at his keep trade cut, the rankings over there's 4 running backs who are all back to back, and I think they're really interesting. So the RB28, that's Kareem Hunt. RB29, Ramondre Stevenson. RB30 is Leonard Fournette, and RB31 is Devin Singletary. So I'm interested to know, where do you rank those guys in terms of your rankings? What order would you have them in?
Yeah, I've got them all in the same tier. I've got Singletary clear at the top of that tier. I think really strong finish to last season. Personally, I don't see the Bills having an impact running back this offseason. I see mocks where there's like Breeze going in round 1. Don't see it personally. They've always added like little pieces. Breeder, Zach Moss recently under this regime. Singletary himself was a day 2 pick as well. So I can't see that big splash name. Further down that tier, I've got Hunt, Fournette, and Ramondre back to back. I do think Fournette is the wild card way out of those 3. With him being an impending free agent, a lot will depend on where he does land. But talent-wise, this might sound outrageous, but I think he's top 5 in the NFL. He was such a good prospect coming into the league. I've still got concerns about work ethic and attitude, but years getting banged in Jacksonville can do that to you. I actually think he's an interesting buy low. I saw people paying first plus last year. And I bet if you're brave now with him being an impending free agent, you can get him for a late second. It doesn't sound like that's something you'd want to do, Matt, but if you was sending a late second for looking for a running back, is there someone else you'd pivot to in that regard? Trying not to mention anybody on this show.
No, I think there's, out of those 4 guys that we just spoke about, there's somebody that I seem to be gravitating towards this offseason. That's from J Stevenson. He's the guy, and it's a shock for me because it wasn't a guy that I was super high on in terms of a prospect. And when he landed with the Patriots, we all know the headache that Patriots backfield can be. So never really somebody that I was super excited about. I did get a couple of shares of him in my draft because he was full into that late third round. So I did take a couple of stabs at him. But from what I've seen this past year, I think he is quite an exciting running back to have. We saw that he put up some good performances when Damian Harris was out. And I just think it's the fact that he's shown that potential. And if he can beat out Harris, I think Harris becomes a free agent next offseason or maybe the year after. So there's that route to him potentially becoming the starter down the line. And I just like the tools. It feels a little bit like a baby Leonard Fournette to me. He's kind of got the same build. He's big, but he's strong and quick as well. So kind of feels like a younger Fournette. So in terms of dynasty, I'm looking at J Stevenson. He's the youngest out of those 4. And that's the guy that I'm probably gravitating towards.
You heard it here first, audience, that J Stevenson's going to be a Super Bowl winning running back in the next 2 years. So, we'll see how that goes. But yeah, obviously Ramondre's got those big, glorious dreadlocks. And another guy that's got big, glorious dreadlocks is my next guy, my first running back I'm going to discuss, Melvin Gordon. He did trim his hair, actually, so maybe I'm a little bit out of date on that one. But really poor segue, to be fair, on that. But
pushing at straws there a little bit, Coach.
Clutching big time. A bit rusty, but yeah, Melvin Gordon, I just really want to discuss Melvin Gordon as the Javonte capper. It's quite funny, actually, to see the Javonte owners squirm. 28-year-old running back, but I still think he's got plenty in the tank. He was running back 22 last season, splitting time. Top 15 in carries, red zone touches, and rushing touchdowns. And he also had 10 touchdowns, which was running back 8. He's still elusive. He was an RB1 in juke rate and evaded tackles, which is great for a guy his age. There's no reason to believe the cliff for him is now. It's actually quite funny. He entered the NFL the same draft as Todd Gurley. So he's clearly outlived Gurley. Cue the Garner funeral music for him. But yeah, it's going to be interesting with the new head coach there, Hackett. He's always used 2 running backs in Green Bay, Aaron Jones with Jamal Williams, and now A.J. Dillon. Will this tendency continue with the Broncos? Gordon, he's always been really good at the goal line. He's had at least 8 rushing touchdowns over the last 5 seasons. He's a competent pass catcher even now at 28. Javonte owners will want to see him go, but if the QB upgrade arrives, it's all in for the Broncos. I think they're immediate contenders and likely to keep Gordon. So I do believe he does cap the upside of Javonte Williams right now, which is it's quite funny because I love seeing Twitter go into a meltdown, but it's also really bad because I do have quite a bit of Javonte as well. So let's just assume that Gordon does stay in Denver on a 1-year deal. Where would you be moving Javonte in your rankings, if at all?
To be honest, I don't think I would be moving him that much. At the moment, I'm going by the theory that I think Gordon is going to stay with Denver anyway. So I've kind of baked that into where I rank Javonte. I've got him as my RB4 currently behind Christian McCaffrey. If maybe Gordon doesn't return, that's maybe where I do bump him up a spot, maybe move him above McCaffrey. But yeah, like you touched upon, I think Gordon he's still got plenty of juice left in him. He proved it this past year, finishing as the RB22. And as much as we hate to admit it, because we all want to see Javonte truly break out and be the full-time starter and the workhorse in that backfield. To be honest, they formed a really good partnership together last year and both look really strong together. So if we're talking in terms of value, maybe Gordon is somebody you should be looking to target in your later rounds. He's currently at RB40. And I mean, even if he does stay or if he does go, I still think that's going to be some real value. And next year, I think he can outproduce that ADP yet again. What's your feelings, Kev? Where do you have Javonte and have you baked in the fact that Gordon's going to stay, or do you think he's going to move?
Yeah, I'm probably going to get crucified for this ranking actually, but I've got him running back 6.
Okay.
Or running back 5, one of them. Basically, I've got Taylor Swift.
Mm-hmm.
Then I've got McCaffrey and Austin Eckler.
Okay.
Because I'm playing on 2-year windows, I just think those two guys, they're going to outscore Najee and Javonte, who are the next two, just a little bit below. So I think he's 5 or 6 for me. If Gordon goes, then becomes a decision. I'll move him above Najee. Yeah. Definitely. But yeah, I still think I'll lean CMC and Eckler just because I tend to be more short-term focused than most. And then just switching back to Gordon, I agree with you. I think he's really interesting at that price. He's still on the board in our startup we're in right now, Matt, and I think I've got a pick before you, so we'll just have to see how that goes. It might be a McHugh.
Don't blame me.
But one guy that's not in McHugh because he's already gone in that draft is your next guy, Matt.
Yeah, and that's James Conner. James Conner, a guy that
James
Conner, because he's about to be a Conner. Well, who knows? We've seen rumors that he might be staying, but yeah, James Conner, a guy that I've never really owned in Dynasty. To be honest, I don't think I've ever owned him at any point. And I'm kind of regretting that, Kev, given this past season. While everyone was getting on that Chase Edmonds hype train before the season started, it turns out we should have been getting on the James Conner hype train because he's the guy that really produced. I think he was going around RB50 last off season. Wow. Managed to finish as the RB5, so just absolutely blew that ADP out of the water and blew Chase Edmonds out of the water as well. Just really productive. Maybe not in terms of his yardage, but I think he had 750 rushing yards, but it was those touchdowns. He actually only trailed Jonathan Taylor in terms of rushing touchdowns with 15. And then he added 3 receiving touchdowns as well. So, as I say, that those touchdowns are what just carried him and turned him into a dominant running back that none of us really expected to see. But as I say, becomes a potential free agent in 2022, as does his fellow Cardinals running back Chase Edmonds. So that's going to be interesting to see what the Cardinals do there. But maybe he's earned himself a shot at another team if he doesn't stay with the Cardinals. Maybe he has a chance to be the lead back somewhere, or at least be that power back. Personally, I see him more as that 1B, that goal line back, that big strong running back, and maybe pair him up with a receiving back a little bit like the Cardinals did with Chase Edmonds. But to be honest, he showed he can be efficient in the receiving game this past year. He was 3rd amongst running backs in terms of yards per reception with 10.1, 4th in yards per route run. And even saw some snaps in the slot as well. He had 23 snaps, which was 12th amongst running backs. So for a guy that big, 6'1", 230 pounds, to see a few snaps in the slot was definitely interesting to see, and just shows that he has got that capability in the passing game. So who knows? Maybe he has shown that potentially can be a workhorse somewhere, or at least earn a bigger role on a different team. Still only 26 years old as well. So like I say, getting up there, but still not quite hit that cliff just yet. So yeah, another really interesting running back that's going to be a free agent in this upcoming off season. So Kev, I'm interested now, where would be your favorite landing spot for James Conner if you could pick one?
Yeah, I'm going to be really boring and say like a team where whoever you put here that people are going to get excited. I'm going to go for the Chiefs.
Okay.
I think Connor's really interesting. The fact that you touched upon it, he's got that size, he's got that performance to be an early down or a pass catching back. So he's going to be really appealing to a lot of teams in free agency that he can fit a number of roles. We know that Andy Reid loves veteran running backs, so this would make sense. I just think with Connor, I don't want him to be my workhorse with his history of injuries, and we saw how he flourished last season in a split backfield. So that's a must in my view. I have to laugh at the people sending a first plus for Connor last season, but I think this Chiefs landing spot, it would actually save a little bit of that tarnished move you made last season and keep him in that running back 2 range. Obviously, if he does land with the Chiefs, that's in a backfield with CH. So I just wonder if he did land there. Obviously, you're a huge CH fan. I see sometimes on Twitter. Sometimes you're not a huge fan. We'll, if we dig up those old takes, but if he did land in KC with CH, who would actually be higher in your dynasty rankings?
Well, it's interesting. Like you said, I've actually got my first share of Clyde Edwards-Helaire this past off season in one of the startups. So I'm starting to warm to the guy, and now you're putting me on the spot trying to slam him back down. And to be honest, I'm still going to lean with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I think I still don't think we've quite seen the full potential that he does have. Like I said, while I'm not super high on him, I don't think he's amazing. I'd love to see him just utilize a little bit more in that passing game. We've spoke about it on previous podcasts that I'd love to see him use maybe a little bit more in the passing game, like that they did with guys like Williams last year and Mckinnon as well when he came in. I just don't get why they don't, why the Chiefs don't do it, and it doesn't make sense. But I just think, obviously, if we're talking about draft capital as well, he was a former first rounder, so you feel like the Chiefs they need to at least see what they've got in him. So if Connor were to land there, I'd imagine that Connor's, while he could definitely vault into that RB2 range like you spoke about if he did take over the backfield. I'm probably in it, and I'm reluctant to say it, but I think I'm still backing Clyde Edwards-Helaire in terms of where I'd rank him. What about you, Kev? Where would you rank him? Because I know you're not super high on Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I think you nailed him as so.
Yeah,
you're going to say James Conner, aren't you?
I am. Yeah, I think it is close. I've got them pretty close already, to be honest. Same tier right now. I've got Edwards-Helaire slightly above, but I think I'd jump on the bandwagon of the public and get crazy for anybody landing in KC, whether that be a running back, a wide receiver, long snapper. Whoever lands there, people go crazy. So I've already heard people saying if Juju Smith-Schuster goes there, which he might come up on next episode when we're talking wide receivers, he's going to jump 15, 20 spots in Dynasty. So that's that chief tax you have to pay, I guess. So that's James Conner, and we're going to now move on to another guy, another interesting guy, actually. Very, 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 very interesting guy, actually. Who have you got?
The waiver wire hero of 2021, Codero Patterson. For a lot of the season, to be honest, he was the Atlanta Falcons' offense in terms of running the ball and catching the ball. They paid just $3 million for him. There was very little interest in him from other teams, but hugely productive in terms of fantasy as well. RB9 in PPR, catching 52 passes, scoring 11 touchdowns on the ground and through the air. So, as I say, just a waiver wire darling really from last year. Age 30 as well, coming up to this season. So he's by no means young.
Youngster, youngster compared to us.
Well, I think he is young, in terms of our age. But in terms of fantasy, there's not going to be many dynasty assets that are getting up to that kind of age, especially as a guy that's labelled as a running back as well, that people are going to get excited about. But I think if you are a contending team, then I think Patterson's maybe somebody you've got to look at. I think there's a chance that he stays with the Falcons. Obviously, that system that they've got and the way that they've used him, that's really suited him and made us being able to see that something that we've never really seen from Patterson before this past year. Then looking at the quarterback as well, Matt Ryan's going to still be there, getting up there in age, even a bit older than us, Kev. So definitely getting up there in age. But he's a guy that's going to be dumping the balls off, giving these quick passes to the running back. So if Patterson is there in that running back spot, he's going to be seeing targets. And then obviously we know he can be used as a wide receiver as well. And there's not really that much competition. Calvin Ridley potentially could be on his way out from the Falcons if he does turn things around, obviously with the struggles that he's had with his mental illness. But there's definitely an opening for Patterson to maybe even be the lead receiver. Obviously, we know that there's a tight end over there that everybody gets excited about, and Kyle Pitts. basically classing him as a wide receiver, aren't we? But yeah, I just think that if he does stay with the Falcons, there's a role there for him. And if you are a contending team, and I do really think you have to be confident that you're going to be a contender, then maybe you could give up a second round pick to get him. I think there's going to be a lot of people that, if they do own him, they're probably looking to get off him, as we say, that he's getting up there in age. If you're not contending, then there's no real reason to keep hold of him. Why not take advantage of that spike in value that he's got, and maybe the contending teams could be looking to get him. So yeah, if you own him, I'd definitely be looking to try and move off him. But Kev, I'm interested to know, following that amazing 2021 season, and obviously the uncertainty that he's got heading into free agency, how are you approaching guys like Patterson in terms of dynasty?
Yeah, I mean, I'd be happy to cash out for him on an early to mid-second. I was told last year you'd be able to sell him for first plus, and this never came close to happening. I did have him in quite a few spots, tried to move him in many leagues. I actually sold him on a rebuild for a second late last year as well, so that was maybe a bit cheap, but it is what it is. I was kind of forced into that by my rebuild, and it was more injury based and player evaluation based on my part, obviously. But yeah, I think if he does move teams, I'd be worried about his outlook. I think with him being a 30-year-old gadget man breaking out so late on his 5th NFL team, that's one that does worry me. On our Hits and Misses show, one thing I took away from Curtis Samuel was not getting too carried away about gadget players on a new team. So if he does move teams, I won't be drafting him at his current price. But I do think if he stays in Atlanta, I'm happy to hold and ride him out on a contending team. I think dynasty players are pretty ageist, so even if he's in that running back one range, I doubt you'll be getting the 23 first for him, especially with being such an amazing class of people are going wild for it. I mean, in a startup, is he a guy you'd take a punt on as a running back 3-4 type?
Yeah, I think it'd have to be getting late into the drafts. I think there's guys where I've seen him going anyway in the startups that we've done, Kev. I think there's guys going around there that I'd much rather be targeting than somebody like Patterson, like Touchman. He's getting up there in age. You've got to be confident you're a contender. And when you're doing these startups, let's be honest, it's a pretty level playing field, isn't it? Unless you've got teams that are fully committed to rebuilding straight away. Everyone's trying to get a team together that can contend. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not super keen on taking him in startups. And then in terms of just being able to buy him from other teams, I'd have to be able to get him for a cheap price. And as I say, know that I'm a contender. If I can get him for maybe a late second, I'm doing it, but I don't feel great about it. And I know I'm taking on risk because there's every possibility that I could be left holding the bag and I've just got Patterson sat there on my bench doing nothing and he fades away into oblivion yet again. So I know there's risk there involved. And as I say, if I'm using that late second, we've talked about other guys earlier on in this podcast. I think there's plenty of guys that I'd much rather target with that late second than somebody like Patterson personally.
Definitely, you mentioned fading into oblivion, and that brings me nicely on to my next guy, which it's in his range of outcomes, to be fair, but it's my former love, Ronald Jones. Former love. Still love him. On course for a top 15 season in my eyes before Leonard Fournette showed up on the bloody eve of the league starting. Cheers for that. But Ronald Jones, I knew was better than Keyshawn Vaughn, and I'm happy I made that call. I stand by it. Never Keyshawn Vaughn, I think, is it the phrase? But I know Ronald Jones gets hammered in the pass game. He's not a good pass blocker, but he has had 40 targets twice. He is a 2-down, unflashy running back. He finished running back 20 in that Super Bowl winning season before Fournette took the lead reins, but entering free agency is going to be 25 years old to begin next season. He has flashed ability as a early down runner. He's not going to be a league winner, but I mean, he might get lucky with a landing spot. He might end up somewhere like the Chargers or the Cardinals as an early down guy to sort of change a bit of a change pace guy on those backfields. Keep trade cut. He's running back 42. I think that's a fair price to acquire a youngish guy that's flashed a little bit as a runner, maybe not as much as a passer. So he's definitely a guy I want to stash and see what happens until free agency at the least. So I think also as a runner, he doesn't get as much credit as the talent that is there as a pure runner. I'll just throw it back to you. Do you think he can be a lead back on an NFL team, and what can his dynasty ceiling be year to year? And that's Ronald Jones.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I can see him being a lead back, but I think he does have to be in a committee like you touched upon. We've seen that explosiveness at times. He does rip off that occasional big play and does really do some exciting things on the field, but then he goes and lets himself down. He might have a fumble, he might miss a blitz pickup, and then he gets benched and dropped. So always a risk involved with somebody like Ronald Jones. And as I say, it really needs that complementary running back beside him in the passing game that can be utilised in that area, because that's an area where Ronald Jones just really struggles over this past couple of years. He's not really shown any terms of having much ability in that side of his game. So with that, I think that does cap his ceiling in terms of fantasy. We know how valuable these receptions are for especially running backs. And you've got to be a super elite runner to be able to negate the fact that you're not contributing in terms of receptions. So I was just thinking like Derrick Henry level of running back and Ronald Jones. As much as I do like him, I'm maybe not to the levels of you, Kev. He's not quite at that Derrick Henry level of running the ball. So yeah, I think he can be a low end RB2 maybe if he lands in a good situation and maybe gets that solid workload on the ground. Then yeah, I think he can maybe be a solid RB2, maybe with little upside though with that like a receiving game. But Kev, what should we think? I know it's a touchy subject with Ronald Jones. I kind of got a little glimpse of it there, getting annoyed about Fournette coming in and taking that lead role. But yeah, what do you think his ceiling could be? Have you got a little bit more optimism for him? Do you think he can maybe improve in the receiving game, or what's your feelings?
Not really. I think the reason I was hiring him at that certain point in time is I knew he was better than Keyshawn Vaughn. And I thought this is his backfield. It was situational. He was going as running back 31, and I just thought it was a smash. And for the most part, it looked a smash. I think if Fournette wasn't there, it's a different story. But yeah, I feel like Ronald Jones is so volatile in the sense that he's got to be on a good team, and it's got to be one that's playing with a lead and he's getting the early down work. If he's on a bad team, he's in big trouble. He's going to be off into the sunset, I think, with Codero Patterson.
I mean, you've got to remember though, he is super young. He came into the NFL really young as well. So I mean, he's still got plenty of years left in him. I think is it 24? I think so.
Yeah,
still got plenty of years left in him, and he's only a couple of years older than somebody like Najee Harris, who's obviously just an incoming rookie this past year. So yeah, I think there's definitely still a chance for him to be able to do something in the NFL, and I think he's worth maybe taking at that given ADP.
Yeah, definitely. And another guy that's definitely worth taking ADP, especially if name's Matt FF Dynasty. It's your last guy, Matt, who I think you might be fond of. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think we've saved the best till last year, aren't we, Kevin? A guy that you quite like as well, and that's Rashad Penny, obviously the guy that we got super excited about with that finish to this previous season. But I just have to talk about my guy Rashad Penny here. And after all the disappointments over the first 3 years, obviously dealing with injuries, it was just great to be able to say that he was a league winner in 2021, and it's been great to see that he's been able to bounce back from the injuries, as I say. Even had his struggles this past year getting back to full healthy. He didn't really play until around week 13. Obviously still recovering from the injuries from 2020, but the timing was just so perfect. Obviously Alex Collins filled in for the injured Chris Carson. And then when he went down with the injury, luckily Rashad Penny was there, being able to step in and, as I say, take full advantage of that with 117.4 fantasy points. That was 19.6 fantasy points per game from week 13 to week 18, and finishes the RB1 in that stretch, Kev. So just as I say, league winner Rashad Penny. It feels so good. So I'm going to keep saying it. So, but it does now open up a really interesting situation. And looking into next year, we know he's going to be a free agent. The Seahawks didn't take up that 5-year option on his contract after he was selected in the first round in 2018. Enters free agency as one of the best finishing running backs to the 2021 season. It's going to be really interesting to see which teams maybe look at him. Do any of the teams value him as a starter, as a lead back, as a maybe even a workhorse? There's guys like teams like the Falcons, Texans, Dolphins. These are all landing spots that I'd really love to see Penny landing, and hopefully gets to the lead role. And Miami Dolphins definitely one that stands out. Obviously, we spoke about it last week with Wardy obviously being the Dolphins fan. I think any running back that now lands on the Dolphins there's going to be a lot of hype building with Mike McDaniel there, and obviously bringing over that hopefully that Kyle Shanahan style offense. So yeah, some really interesting landing spots, and a guy that I'll definitely be keeping a close eye on to see where he lands. So Kev, I'm interested to know, he's currently ranked as the RB 34 on Keep Trade Cut, around the previously mentioned James Conner and another potential free agent in his fellow Cardinals running back Chase Edmonds. Who would you rather own out of those three guys in terms of dynasty?
I mean, it's like you've stolen from me, Matt. Are you the Tinder swindler? I mean, obviously Penny's got you hooked in. Let's hope he's not got you investing your draft picks in him and leaving you paying for it in the future, much like the Tinder swindler did. But yeah, all jokes aside, I've got these back to back in my rankings, hence why I'm suggesting you're a thief. But yeah, I'm sure you'll be delighted to hear I've got Penny at the top, a little bit like Fournette in the sense that he's super talented and he stands out in my running back model. I've long been a Penny truther, then I switched to Chris Carson last year. That worked out fantastically for me. So I'll just switch back this year. It's fine. We'll just erase that. And then speaking of landing spots, I'd actually love Penny in Atlanta with Arthur Smith, the coach who began to maximise King Derrick Henry. I'm not putting Penny on that spectrum, but I do think he fits that power run game really well. And he's got to be better than Mike Davis and Caleb Huntley. So yeah, I know you mentioned a few potential spots for Penny to land. Is the one that actually grabs your eyes out of those you mentioned?
Yeah, like I say, I think that the Dolphins one's one that really stands out for me. If he can be used in that, what we've seen from the 49ers, we know that the fantasy value that kind of backfield has, and we spoke about it last year with the New York Jets, and obviously they're switching to that kind of Kyle Shanahan backfield. And then when Michael Carter landed there, you know how we're getting really excited, really excited about that. So again, it's kind of similar with this. If a guy like Penny, a guy that I'm really high on, lands on one of these spots like the Dolphins, which is could be a really exciting backfield in terms of fantasy, then yeah, it's going to be hard for me to rein it in, Kev. I'll be sending all my dollars over to the Tinder swindler, and yeah, he can have everything he wants off me, because I've seen that lavish lifestyle. I've seen that RB1, that RB1 for the back half of the year, and I'm fully invested, and I'll pay whatever it takes.
That's quality, yeah. If you need to watch Tinder Swindler.
Yeah, but otherwise this whole segment
doesn't make sense. But but yeah, that brings us to the end of the running backs. We are going to do a quick summary on the remaining QBs and running backs that's left over. So, I mean, but one guy that stands out to me, David Johnson, is 1 year removed from running back 21 finish in fantasy. It was actually running back 16 in fantasy points per game. The nostalgia of 3 top 10 finishes early on in his career, and I see him at worst a third down guy. He's had 30 catches every season. He's going to be limited to be a split back, but 30 years old, I still think he's got juice in there. You've got Justin Jackson. What a dirtbag. He won a league against me, my home league, but he has been solid enough in that handcuff role of Austin Eckler for the Chargers. He could have untapped potential. He's not got a lot of tread on the NFL tires. And then James White, another 30-year-old pass-catching running back, up and down the last couple of seasons, but he's had 2 top 20 finishes previously. He actually started last season 30-plus fantasy points over his first 2 games. I'd prefer for him to stick with the Patriots. If he doesn't, though, it's Ramondre Stevens season.
Absolutely. A guy that we spoke about a little bit earlier, Chase Edmonds, is another one that's going to be a free agent, really solid pass catching running back who has shown that he can produce when given that bigger workload. I'm hoping that he can find a way into a better fit on a roster that maybe can utilize him a little bit better, especially in terms of the passing game. So going to be really interesting to see where he lands, and somebody that maybe you can be looking at taking a shot on and seeing where he ends up in Dynasty. Then another guy, J.D. McKissick, sticking with this pass catching running back. Another guy that produced in terms of the passing game, and sadly at the expense of Antonio Gibson, a guy that we quite like over here at the Fantasy Wildcard. Seen rumours that he might actually be staying with Washington, which, as a Gibson fan, I'm really hoping that doesn't happen. But in terms of fantasy, he offers some value, especially in PPR. PPR leagues averaged over 80 targets over the last couple of years. So another guy to keep an eye out for. And then Jarrett McKinnon as well. Spoke about him a little bit earlier as well with the Chiefs. Had a really quiet year, being the RB3 on that roster, but really shone in the playoffs when called upon. 150 rushing yards, 165 receiving yards, and a touchdown in those three games that he did play. Probably unlikely to carry much value in terms of dynasty, but definitely another guy to maybe keep an eye on and see if he does land in a nice spot, maybe he can offer a little bit of value and can be a bye week fill in.
Indeed, and there's just a couple more quick hits. Guys,
you have to get this one in. You have to get this one in, Kev.
I mean, Mal. First of all, we'll go with boring one first. Marlon Mack. He's twice been a running back 2 in 2018, 2019. A new start for him. He's obviously got stuck behind Jonathan Taylor for the Colts, and then I mean the main event really, Max Mariota. He's going to be a free agent, so oh my god, I hope something good happens for him. And then Sony Michel, your guy, he looked really good towards the back end of this season as well. So another interesting chap there, and it just feels perfect show to speak about all the guys we love: Sony Michel, Rashad Penny, Mariota, Ronald Jones.
It's been a great show, Kev. I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
It's been emotional, and we've not given Ali any stick tonight either. So
no, he's got away with that one.
He's very lucky boy, very lucky indeed. But yeah, that brings us to the end of the show where we've previewed the upcoming free agent QBs and running backs from a dynasty point of view. What's your final thoughts on today's show, Matt?
Yeah, I just think that free agency, it's a really interesting part of the off season. These guys can have effects on not just their own value, but wherever they end up as well. It can affect other players' values. So there's definitely some risk, but potentially some reward to have as well when going for these guys. Maybe try and grab them before you find out landing spots, get them cheap, and then there's every chance that they could end up in an improved landing spot, and you get a little bit of return on value there. And then as mentioned, there's in terms of quarterback, it's not really an exciting class. It's not really exciting in terms of the free agents that are coming up at the quarterback position. But there's definitely opportunities for these guys that we've mentioned to, as I say, land in a good spot, get a little bit of value back in terms of the dynasty value, and then hopefully you can maybe make moves to either move them on or hopefully it can help your rosters out.
Indeed, I think like most years, the QB free agent class, it's littered with backups and journeymen with the odd diamond in the rough, Mariota. But yeah, I think free agent running backs, they're already approaching the age apex at 25 years old minimum, so they're going to be held in lower regard to begin with. I think both of these positions, though, they should be making up the majority of your dynasty benches. I think it's important to take shots on these type of guys, hold these guys as many as you can, really. You might get lucky with a landing spot or some injury luck next season, and then just Max Mariota. He deserves another chance in the NFL. Please make it happen. Please make my year. That'd be amazing. Thank you very much. So, thank you for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe and follow us on Twitter at Fantasy Wildcard. Also, leave us a 5-star podcast review if you've enjoyed the show today. It really helps with getting exposure to a wider audience. And join us on our next show, which drops the podcast next Tuesday, the 1st of March, and streams on Wednesday, the 2nd at 8 p.m. We'll welcome on the fantastic Sam Holt of Dr. Roto to discuss her dream free agent landing spots. Should be a really exciting show, finding out some free agent dreams. So thank you once again. Have a good one, and we'll see you soon.